Yeah. Yeah, really nice to be here and see you from down here. Little surprised, they asked me after lunch, so I wasn't really prepared, but I will do the talk that I should have done on Saturday, so I have to make a new talk for Saturday. So there will be another one, so you can stay. Yeah, I started gardening about 30 years ago, and I think I'm doing the opposite to all the other speakers today. I'm trying to create as bad conditions as possible, taking away all organic material and really make the plants suffer as much as I can. So no nutrients, no water, just creating really harsh conditions. My old garden was outside of Gothenburg. I lived there for about 12 years, and that was a wet spruce forest to start with, and I created a landscape for steppe plants and desert plants. And this is my favorite area, going to the steppe in Caucasus, Central Asia, Western America, hot, dry places where it's not raining on me. And I love all the plants from these conditions. And to be able to grow them in the wet climate in Sweden, you really have to create similar conditions as how they grow in the wild. So all these plants, they just hate compost and peat most of all. So that's a very good reason to also stop using peat, because that's really the worst material for plants. So if you want to make it really bad in your garden, use peat. But otherwise, that's... Yeah. So just stop using it just for the plants and for the environment. So going to Caucasus, in Ghani, there's like plants meeting from Russia and Iran and Turkey. So it's very concentrated. Armenia is the same size as Belgium, but they have double the amount of plants that in Scandinavia. So they have about 3,500 species there, and we have 1,800 in Scandinavia. And just exploring this area, just walking around here, it's 40 degrees, really nice weather, and just looking where do the plants grow. Do they grow on the slope or the bottom or the screes? Just trying to understand why they occupy these different places. Or the Pontic Alps in northern Turkey, also a very interesting area. It's like walking around in a garden. And many of our garden plants, they come from this area. And then we think they are difficult when we plant them in the wet soil with a lot of compost. And we think, oh, they are difficult. But of course, if you plant a cacti in the pond, it will be difficult. So this is what I really need. So trying to create these kind of conditions in a garden. This was a spruce forest when I started, and I was digging there for 10 years. I was reshaping the whole garden. In the deepest part, I had to dig away 3 meters of soil, and all the soil I moved to the other side. So I was like moving the valley 15 meters to create this really south-facing, hot, dry place, to be able to grow plants from California and Turkey and in a wet climate in Sweden. And I also added, I think, 4,000 or 5,000 tons of sand to create these really well-drained, poor conditions. And there I could grow plants from all over the world. On the wet north-facing slope, there was primulas from the Himalayas. 2 meters away, there was cacti from Utah. So in a very small spot, you can create all these small niches to be able to grow a very wide range of plants. And it was all done by hand. It's a spade and a wheelbarrow. I also create these microhabitats and trying to plant the plant as they will grow in the wild, the cushions up on the crest, the sedums on the rocks, all these microhabitats that you will find in the wild. And I also like to build a garden as nature. So you have to explore it. You're walking around and finding all these small groups of plants. And I had about 12,000 different species in the garden. But also mixing plants from all over the world to get a really long flowering season. So mixing the steppe with natives and North American species. But they all come from similar conditions in the wild. And I didn't water it. I water them once when I plant them, and then never more, never fertilized. In the end, the last 5 years I had a garden. I lived in the south, so I had a week a year to maintain 2 hectares. And I thought in nature reserve you often do it by burning, so I did that. So every spring I went there with a gas burner and just burnt down the whole garden. And that's the most fun and effective way to clean the garden for spring. And it was really interesting to follow it when I didn't have time to weed it or maintain it, how it behaved. And most of the weeds, they disappeared by themselves. By not weeding them, you don't disturb the soil, and then they don't germinate again, because they're all depending on this disturbance. So by not weeding, you don't get the weeds. And then we moved to Klinta. I met Julia. She lived in Malmö, so I had to move there. And then, yeah. And then we bought Klinta. It was an old nursery. There was a big greenhouse and all the buildings we needed. So we took a walk in the garden and looked at the greenhouse, and then we said, we buy it. And the owner asked, do you want to see inside the house too? Yeah. And this was all a totally flat lawn. It was 10,000 square meter of grass with hedges and like no variation. It was all flattened out. And I bought it together with Julia. She's a landscape engineer teaching at the university in Alnap, plant knowledge and planting design. And that's always difficult when you buy a garden together with another gardener. So we decided directly we have to have our own areas. So we divided, and it was very easy. Julia, she likes clay and compost and all of that. And as you probably know, I like the steppe and the dry places. Yeah, and the garden is, like in the middle of the garden there is a line, and half the garden is clay and half is sand. So it was very easy to just divide it. I have the dry side and Julia have the wet side. And all the organic material from my side, we just moved to her side. And it's a small company, it's Klinta Trädgård, and we're working all over Sweden, and yeah, we did a project in London this year, and Denmark and Norway, and Moscow once. And it was just me and Julia, and then we have Jonathan sitting there, and Emily is full-time, and then Elfrida, who works 1 day a week during the season. And then we have a lot of nice volunteers and students coming the whole season, helping us, so it's always a lot of fun. And we want to stay small, because then we can do all the different steps. We don't want to be a big company, because then you're just ending up in the office, and that's not my favorite place. Everybody who tried to send me emails, that's not my favorite place to be. So try again. Yeah. And in the garden, this is in a quite flat landscapes. We can't build this dramatic landscape as I could in my old garden. So now it's more small amount. But still creating like, habitats that are similar to nature and planting the plants where they should occur. If you go to Turkey, you will see the tulips on the south side, and they're not everywhere. They have very small niches, and if you plant them in a similar niche in the garden, they will be long-lived. But if I put it on the north side instead, it will be too cold and they will disappear. If I put them 1 meter further down, it will be too wet and they will not come back. But in this little stretch, that's where they would grow in the wild too. And then they will live for many years. Yeah, so this is how it looks when I try to do the soil as poor as possible. So it's sandy soil to start with. So I took away all the topsoil to get rid of all the rich nutrients. And then I mounded it and added more sand to get better drainage. And then I added another layer of sand on top of that to get it really poor. And then I planted a lot of things from the steppe that come from similar conditions in the wild. Water them once, and then they just grow. So the problem is to stop them growing. It's really difficult to get it bad enough to slow it down. And then every winter we cut down everything, clean the bed as much as possible, not leaving any organic material. And all this we just use in the Julia side, in the woodland area, where we want a thick layer of compost. So it's all moved around inside the garden. And in the spring, it's just full of bulbs, and then it's just new layers every month. So doing this variation, just a small, just digging down 20 centimeter and raising up 20 centimeter. You have this, you get the south side and you get the north side, and it's very different conditions. Down in the bottom, a little more moisture. Up on the top, a little drier. So by creating a landscape, you also have a lot of opportunities to grow plants in the right niches. If it was just flat and topsoil on everything, there's no variation, and you could only grow a very small pallets of plants. And in the beginning, I only did it for the plants. I didn't think at all about insects. They were more annoying. But then in the end, you start building all these habitats for plants, and there is a lot of interesting things coming in, and strange people coming there with looking at them and telling this is good. So I started more and more adding biodiversity to the plantings, and now it's getting a quite big part of what we're doing. So I'm just putting a mound of sand on the lawn. The neighbor took down some trees, so we just placed them on the soil and filled up. And for the plants, we use a quite coarse sand, but that's not perfect for the insects. So then we're adding these mounds of finer sand, and sometimes adding some clay to them for the insect to dig in, and a lot of dead wood. And this was done in the spring, and the same planting in the summer. And it's nice with insects, because they are coming in really quick. If you do something in the spring, you will see the result in the summer. So you don't have to wait 10 years or something. They find it really quick. Also, the only maintenance here is to cut it down in the winter and take away the organic material. And we use that on the vegetables. Also trialing using different recycled material. So the bed to the left, it's just crushed concrete. And the plants like it a little too much. I think it's too much minerals, and it's too good for them. But it's a very good material to use, but I don't see many insects nesting in it. So I think a combination of recycled material and sand beds, as John is doing, is this variation in the soil and the landscape. That's the important part. So in the concrete, it's not just these small gray things from Kazakhstan that likes to grow. It's like 2-meter perennials, and it's really big and lush. And I normally never use any ground covers, because they're just taking up too much space. I like taproots and the things. Then I can have 100 species in a square meter, instead of one just taking up too much space. So skip the ground covers, then you're wasting space. And I love the steep paths from the steppe. And even when you go to Turkey and these dry areas, they always grow on the driest part in the dry area. So up on the hills where it's always windy. So wind is very important for the plants. So the first thing I did when I started on this side of the garden, I took away all the hedges. There was 3 hedges to stop the wind. And there's wind power stations just outside of the garden. So it's a very windy spot. So without the hedges, the garden is much windier, and the plants like it much more. So take away your hedges, especially on the west side, to get more wind into the garden. And this Stipa pulcherrima from Turkey is a really beautiful grass. It keeps the feather for about 2 months, starting the end of June, and last one falls in the middle of August. But it really needs these mounded, dry conditions to be long-lived. And all these small strips of soil, the cities are full of them, on the south side of a house where it's very dry, it's perfect for bulbs. Before, there was just some grass that was just brown the whole summer. So we took it out, and it's just gravel under it. So then we planted a lot of bulbs. And when you want a lot of bulbs, you need a lot of bulbs. It's not one bag from the supermarket. So here we plant about 1,500 bulbs per square meter. But then you get like a bulb show for 5 months, just solid bulbs for 5 months. And then they all go dormant in the summer, and then it's a perfect habitat for solitary bees and other insects that are living in the sand in the autumn. And then it just starts all over again in the spring. So add a few zeros to your orders next time. And then we started landscaping, and it was really difficult to find plants with a good quality and also the varieties we want to have. So we had to start our own nursery. And this is the best, having your own nursery without customers. so all the plants is just for us. And we hired Jonathan, so he's responsible for the nursery. And then Emily, she's coming with me on different projects. And then we do everything together at home. So the whole nursery is just frames with sand. Put some Mypex in the bottom to stop the roots from growing down in the soil below. And then it's just 20 centimeter sand with a frame of wood around it. In the winter, we cut everything down, clean them as much as possible. And all the organic material from the nursery we use for the vegetables. So they're just moved a few meters away. And then we plant everything bare-rooted, water them once, and then just leave them until we need them. The area is about 3,000 square meters. Last year, we digged up about 200,000 plants there. And the best thing, they grow faster than we use them. So the nursery is still full. So now we have to reduce the beds because we have too many plants. So it's extremely productive, never fertilized, never watered. 2018, when people thought it was a dry summer, we didn't water anything. And in August, people was angry when I came because everything was so green and lush, and their garden was just brown. So sand is really a good alternative for the future, or it could be concrete, all of it. It would be perfect too. So when I make a sand bed, I always put it on top of the soil. If you dig a hole and fill it with sand, it will become a pond. That's where all the water will go in when it's raining. So it always has to be on top of the soil. And the sand I normally use is from 0 to 8 millimeters, so very well drained. And there shouldn't be too much clay in it, or no clay. So the cake test is very good. If you can make a cake of it, then it's too fine, and it will keep the moisture too much in the winter and dry out too much in the summer. And then about 20 centimeter. And you can see it a little bit here. The top 10 centimeter will dry out very quick in the summer. But then it will always be moist in the winter. If you go to the beach in the summer and put down your toes, it's always cold and moist. So sand is not dry. It's really good at keeping moisture. But it's also very well drained, so it's never wet and it's never dry. So perfect conditions for plants. Just keeping this even moisture. And it's extremely poor, so they don't grow too much. But then after a while, you get a lot of mycorrhiza in the sand. And that helps the plant to pick up nutrients and moisture, and so that's why it works without all this compost and feeding. And if you're feeding the sand beds, then the plants take this easy feeding because they don't need to give anything away. So by fertilizing it, you destroy the symbiosis with the mycorrhizas and the bacteria. So just wait. Normally it's a slow process. The first year, the plants are just suffering, making roots, just establishing. The second year, they start to grow, and then the third year, they are really going on. But it's the opposite to a normal planting, where it looks great for the opening, and then you have to rebuild it after 3 years. So it's a slow process, as it would be in nature. Yeah, the sand beds are slow, but the plants develop massive root system. I think this is the second year. And when we use them, we just pull them up, shake off the sand, put them in the bag, and bring them to the job. And we do that any time of the year, unless it's frozen. So it's fine to do it in the middle of the summer. If the client wants a nice planting, they get the whole thing. If they want a low budget, we divide it a lot. If they want it really cheap, we slaughter it. So I think the salvia could probably be at least 100 plants. You just take the roots and cut them in 5 centimeter pieces, and that's a nice plant. If you want more, you can cut it in the middle, and you have even more. Or maybe if you are from Scotland, you can do 4 of it. So it's very easy to propagate plants. It's very easy to make too many. The hard thing is to get rid of them. And this year we did a a playground in London, in Covent Garden playground. So we did it in the landscape. It was really compacted soil. It was really stinking, and there was like no life in it. But it had been like sinking down about 20 centimeters. We just filled up with sand. I was digging a little bit, but it was really smelling, so we just put the sand on top of the existing soil. And then in July, we brought 6,000 plants in full flower, planted it there, and watered them once. It was a wet week, so we were lucky with that. And also the transport. There's all the plants in full flower in July, and then just pack them in the car, planting them a week later, watering them, and then they just keep on growing. Normally it's nice roots with a little bit of foliage, so it's not these massive plants with small roots that you get from nurseries. The good thing is underground. So the first year they're just establishing, they will just sit there, but then we are adding annuals to it to get a nice display the first year. So if you go there now, it's probably full of Californian poppies and other things, filling the gaps the first year. And then they will slowly disappear and will be replaced with the perennials. So after a few years, it will look like this, or similar. This is from Malmö, just by the coast. So very windy, salty. And this is an extension out in the sea. So it's all just stone and gravel below it. So there's no good soil anywhere. It's just gravel with a sand bed on top. And this bed is, I think, 6 years now. And the only maintenance is to cut it down in the winter and take away organic material. The staff, they go there and weed it, but they're spending more time looking for weeds than pulling the weeds. So they really like it. And that's always a good start. If the maintenance people like it, then it will work. Yeah, so when we do a planting, we just bring all the plants, and I place them out where I want them, and then people help me to plant them. This is a green roof we did at Klinta. We have a trial area with testing different low-weight substrate and recycled material. So this was planted in November, and I think this is 3 years later. And on the roof, we fertilize a little bit because it's leaking too much nutrients, and the mycorrhiza don't seem to work as good on the roofs. But it's very little fertilizing in the spring and no watering, so they have to survive on it. And no organic material. This is pumice, sand, and biochar mixed. Yeah, it's great if you can buy bare-rooted plants, and there is Reinbeck is here. He has a good quality bare-rooted plant that you can buy in the winter, but then it's difficult to get them in the summer, and it's not all varieties. So we do buy a lot of plants in pots. But then normally we buy one box, or sometimes just one pot, and then we wash away all the soil to get them totally clean, and then before we plant them out in the nursery. So many of the stock beds are just a single pot to start with. So we have spent maybe £3 on it to start with. So the plants in the nursery are extremely cheap. So that's why we can do this really low budget project and still earning quite a lot of money. Yeah, and after meeting John, I started to build a lot of more things. So this was a part of the nursery, and now we are reducing the growing areas and adding interesting structures to it instead. And we're doing that more into our project too, just adding variation in the landscape. But one of the best things is just to dump a load of sand and leave it, and it will just be occupied by insects really quick. And then having different fractions of the sand, you get different insects living in them. So it don't have to be an expensive, fancy insect hotel. Just a pile of sand is perfect. And then a pile of wood beside it, and then you have done a lot. And also after John's party 2 years ago, the big thing on the party was the moth trap. And then we had the students that summer, and she had a moth trap that we put out like every night. And when she left, I had to buy my own. And this year, I have put it out almost every night since January. I think I'm up in about 400 different species in the garden this year, and quite a lot of red-listed and rare species. And this year, I got a diploma from the Swedish Entomology Society. So that was, I think, the best prize I could get. It was just a diploma, no money or anything, but just to be recognized by that group of people that I'm doing good things. Because it's a lot of experiment. And there's really good apps that you can figure out what it is. There was a small butterfly, and the app was almost sure it was a European eel. and then I zoomed in, and it was 100% sure it was an anchovy. So you always have to be a little skeptic to the answer. Yeah, and at Klinta, it's our garden and the nursery, and when we bought it, I thought it's too small, I need something more. So I've been looking for a small farm for some years. And 2 years ago, we found this. And when I look on the Google pictures, there was like one bale on every meadow. So I thought, this is really bad. This is a good farm. We need this. It was mainly moss and a few species. It was really poor, sandy soil. And there was a house, so we have renovated the house for students so they can stay there. And then it's a 6-hectare playground where I want to create habitat for insects and just trialing different things. So all the different meadows, we're doing different things. On the top left, we're cutting that in late autumn. Some areas where there is a lot of weeds, we trim them down several times a year to have this bare soil, and at the same time getting rid of the weeds after a while. All the wood we cut down, we just put them in piles, building roads, but only using the soil from the site. And also the maintenance will be different from the different areas. So on the south side, we'd burn it in the spring. Some areas we cut with machines, some we are sieving. And the ravine, we dig down 3 meters and made these 5-meter tall hills. So it's all the existing soil. And that the valley the digger did in less than 2 days. So you can do quite a lot with a big digger. Yeah. But it will be really interesting to follow this, to see what's happening and how little maintenance you have to put into it to still get a good result. Yeah, and having this like almost 2-meter clay walls, and just a big variation, making piles and just playing around and observing what's happening. Yeah, we have the students staying there, and it's a hard work being at Klinta. They're sitting here and playing with sand. And we also invite other companies that are doing good things. Rethinking, they are doing a lot of meadow restoration and sieving courses. And so we are working a lot together with other small, interesting companies. And Michael, my entomologist, so people like this is so important for the future. He's coming there and he's doing a survey this first year to see what's there before we do too much. I think we really need people like him for the future, all these experts in fungi and insects and whatever, because most people in here, we're good at some things, but there's always someone that is better. And I can't know everything about insects and exactly what I did, but I can ask Mikael, because he knows most of them. So I think the future is for the nerds and the experts, because they have the knowledge, and we have to learn from them. We're also doing some quite big-scale projects. This is a sound barrier in Vellinge. It's south of Malmö. And they had a barrier already, but it's gravel in the middle, and then it was covered with soil. and I wanted to make it higher. And I had another pile of sand or gravel, so we could scrape off all the good soil and just put that in the bottom of the wall. And then we build up with gravel, and then cover it with a layer of sand between 20 and 10 centimeter. But also adding these islands of different material with fine sand and coarse sand and stones. And then we planted about 1,000 woody plants and sowed 60 kilos of seeds in 17 different seed mixes, because there is so much variation on the hill. Down in the bottom, there is these wet ditches, and you have this windy crest on the west side and the east side. And if the plant will only grow in this coarse gravel on the south side, there's no point of sowing it on the north side. So then we're just waiting seeds. So doing a special mix for every area, and then some plants is in every mix. But you really need this mixture. So about 300 different species. And the deal to start with was no maintenance. And we did it 6 years ago. And I haven't spent a minute on it. Yeah, and most of the seeds we collect ourselves. So we collect about 100 kilos of seeds every year from the garden and roadsides and everywhere. So IKEA's laundry baskets are perfect for seed collecting. And then we can just collect them really quick in the summer, and then we clean them in the winter when the weather is too bad to be outside. Yeah, we sowed it in September, and it was this perfect winter, mild autumn, not too cold in winter. I think almost everything germinated and survived. You also see the number of species and plants in just a very small area. It's more than 11 pots per square meter. It's a lot more when you're sowing. And it was a public project, and the public like color. This is nothing for insects. It's just a few species, not very interesting species either. But it's colorful and nice, and people like it. So all areas that was close to parkings and pathways, we added a lot of color to it for the people to like it. And then we did more interesting areas for insects on other sides. So this is more what the insects want, this variation in the landscape with bare sand and a big variation in the plants and genus. And I think if it looked like this along the parkings, people would probably complain and thinking that the city is wasting money on this because this will occur anyway. So give them color and they're happy the first year. And the next year they will forget about it anyway. So then they have other things to focus on. And we go there every year with Michael to study it and see how it develops. So this is after 6 years with no maintenance. They haven't cut down anything. It's all left on the site. But it's a very dry and windy place in southwest Sweden. So the climate is good. It slows everything down. If you did it in Scotland, it will turn into grass much quicker. So a dry climate is very good. But you can really do this like almost no maintenance plantings if you just make them poor enough, and the succession will be extremely slow. And there's a lot of rare insects moving in, and if I did it again, I would add a lot more dead wood or more structures to it and get more variation into it. But that's also quite easy to do afterwards. If you just have the landscape, you can just add things. And by the bus station, we added some more garden plants to make it a little bit more garden-like. But also nice edges and framing the wild so it don't look too messy. And then there's more people liking it. And here they do a little bit of maintenance. They cut it down in the winter and take away most of the organic material. But that's the only maintenance they do. So I guess they are spending a few hours a year on a planting like this. It's just too dry for weeds, and if there are any, they are just hidden with everything else. And then in the late summer, there's a lot of nice seed heads, and they stay over winter, and then they cut it down in early spring. Yeah, and I'm always mixing plants from all over the world to get a much longer flowering season. But sometimes the city only wants natives, and this is a planting with only natives. And the ornamental value goes down quite quickly. But this was in an industrial site, and it wasn't that important that the public would like it. And for the insect, it's perfect. They like suffering plants, then they can't resist them as much. And so for biodiversity, this is good, but for ornamental value, it's maybe not the best. Also, just a lot of hills on gravel, different material from fine sand to coarse sand. So you have to think if you do this in the city center, I think there will be very few people liking it. Maybe a few of you, but I think most people wouldn't. So you have to think where you do these wild plantings. It has to fit into the surroundings and the landscape. But there is places for this too. And the project we did in Hör, it was a farmland, and they are going to build a new housing area. And we had an extremely low budget. And I thought we spent all the money on the diggers, because that's the most important. We didn't have any drawings. There was a sketch, just roughly what I wanted, but we never followed it. And all the soil we got from the building projects. So and instead of paying to get rid of it or driving it away to other places, they could just dump it here for us. So we get all the soil, all the stones for free. So it was just, and they want to make it should be a rain garden, it should be an interesting landscape for people, and beautiful, and biodiversity, and all of that, and no budget. It was just a ditch when we started. And this is 1 week later. Every day, Anton from the city, he came there and made a drawing while we were building. So in the end of the week, he had a map, what we had. So this is what 2 diggers did in a week. And then we just added pathways and planted about 2,000 woody plants there and sowed it. And this whole project costed about £15,000, including pathways and diggers and plants and seeds and all of it. You wouldn't even get a paper from an architect for that money. And it will be a mess. We're just using all this soil from the farmland. It's just full of every weed. So we sowed in a mixture of annuals, but also these long-lived perennials. The first year, it looks quite okay. There's quite a lot of flowers with the weeds. I think the second year, it will be mostly weeds. People will not like it, but they haven't built the house yet, so it doesn't matter. And then it will be full of shrubs. So then after 5 years, we will go in and decide what we want to keep. We planted much more trees than we want there. And then we can just decide, shall we keep the oak or the birch or hazel, or shall it be open? And that's a decision you can do 5 years later. And then after 30 years, you might get, or 50, you will have an oak forest, or what you decide to do with it. So it's a really long time process. But with the landscape, you have a lot of opportunities to do things what you want later. But you could spend all the money on benches and a few big trees and pathways, and then you still just have a flat landscape and no variation and no opportunities. So just put the money on the landscape, and then you can fix it later. Or just leave it. We tried to keep all the sandy soil for the south side. So we did some quite tall hills, I think about 6 meters tall. And up on them, we just sowed these dryland species. And this looks really promising the first year. If it looked like a failure, then you know it's good. If it's green, then you failed. Because this will be a really slow process. 5 years later, it will still be a lot of flowers. but all the green areas, they will just be grass. So try to create as bad conditions as possible, and it will be a very slow process. And then you can decide what you do, and maybe only put all the maintenance on these dry areas to keep them open and colorful, and then let the other area be a forest. Yeah, so the project is, it starts down here and to the oaks in the background. So totally it's 3,000, not about 3 hectares, and it costed 55,000 pounds for the whole landscape. So you can do a lot with very little money. And we had a volunteer this summer, and he said that the industry should be ashamed that not everybody works like this. And I totally agree. We're wasting far too much money, and then you're designing something that you have to import from China, or when you have material that you could use. But you can't draw this in beforehand, because you don't know what you find until you start digging. So it's more having a vision. This is the kind of landscape we want to have. And then you start digging, and we find out this, and then we might do this instead, or that. So be very open, just having an idea, and then you're working with the things you have. And suddenly you get 1,000 lorries with sand or something, because someone wants to get rid of it. And then, we make another hill, or we do that instead. Just be open, and don't skip your egos, and work with the site instead. And the maintenance is and the disturbance. It would be great if the city was full of cows, but it's a little difficult. But we can do the same things. Instead of buffaloes, just invite Metallica and 30,000 headbangers. They are exactly like a buffalo herd. Or just a bicycle track, or a volleyball field, and all the insects would love to live on the edges. And so you have to find using people instead of cattle. So there's always other ways to do it. And stop doing this. You have this perfect limestone, gravelly soil that's really poor, and then they're adding peat on it. And to reduce the weeds, they put a carpet over it, and then they make holes and plant in it. So they're just destroying the site, and they will have a maintenance problem for the next 50 years, instead of just using the landscape. And it's nice shapes, and it could be beautiful meadows. And it's even worse. They have this perfect pile of gravel, limestone, and then they're doing these raised beds with peat, and then they're planting drought-tolerant plant that hate peat, and the plant that would like peat, they hate these dry conditions. So they're just taking away all opportunities to grow something here. And the maintenance is massive, and the watering, and they have to fill up with new peat every year because it's just disappearing. So use the gravel, it's perfect. And go out of your office. This is where the magic happens. David he has a small digger, and when we make a drawing, it's something like that. It's in Swedish, but I think you get it. I show this to him, can you build this? And he knows exactly how to put a row of stones, much better than I do. So he don't need more than that. And if there is any questions, he can just ask me. And Gustav is a project leader from a city, and he's always out on the sites every day and talking with the landscapers and changing things all the time. And when the landscape is ready, I go there and see what I have done, and then I decide what plant I think is suitable for the area. And I think my time is out, but yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Peter.